75 years. You know it's been 75 years since the end of the Holocaust. Decades of testimony, thousands of books and films have been created with the goal that we should remember and learn from one of humanity's darkest chapters. Given all that, you'd think that knowledge of the Holocaust would be expansive, right? And yet just last year, a principal in Florida made national headlines when he said he couldn't say for sure that the Holocaust was a factual historical event. What? And recently, Claims Conference released a study that showed that more than 60% of Americans do not know that 6 million Jews were murdered during the Holocaust. And 10%? 10% even think that the Jews themselves caused the Holocaust. Alarming, right? And that is why, as CEO at Illinois Holocaust Museum, I started to think deeply about how we could use technology to share the history and lessons of the Holocaust for today and for future generations in the most impactful ways. How could we use lessons from the past to transform the future, to build empathy and an understanding of our common humanity, working towards that day when never again is a reality for all people? The answer, it turns out, is to combine powerful historical storytelling with technology to engage the audience with that history. In this instance, to engage the audience with survivors who actually lived that history. You can have award-winning books and films and exhibitions, but there's just no substitute in building empathy and an understanding of our common humanity that comes from interacting with another human being. Imagine now sitting opposite Fritzi Fritschall, who survived Auschwitz, as she recounts for you her story, how as a 13-year-old, she and her family were torn from their home and taken by railcar to the notorious concentration camp where most of her family was murdered. What if you could ask her questions about what it was like in Auschwitz, or even about those brave upstanders who risked their own lives to save hers? Or maybe you're wondering, what is her message for us today? Well, now you don't have to wonder. You can ask these questions of her interactive hologram. After years of working on this project in association with our partner, USC Shoah Foundation, I stood in the back of the museum's holographic theater as the first classroom of students and teachers filed in. They took their seats and the lights dimmed as a brief introductory video began in which Fritzi narrated the outline of some of her experiences, including how she worked as a slave laborer in a subcamp of Auschwitz as one of 600 dirty, hungry, head-shaven women. And these women, they hoped that one amongst them might survive to share this incredible and horrific story. And since Fritzi was the youngest, they thought that perhaps she'd have the best chance to survive. And so, each night, 599 of those dirty, hungry, and head-shaven women lined up to give Fritzi one crumb of their meager bread ration. All those crumbs together were the size of a small marble. Fritzi then leaned forward in her seat and she said to the audience, "But I have so much more to tell you, so please ask me questions." There was the briefest of pauses as that sunk in with the audience and as the program switched to interactive mode. Then one hand went up, then 3, and then 5, and question after question was answered by Fritzi's hologram. Take a look.
So does anyone have a question for Fritzi?
What was the hardest experience in the concentration camp?
I thought I would die when I was walking towards the gas chambers. I thought I would die when I didn't have enough food.
I tried to hold it in, but there was a point where I just asked my question and I just couldn't hold it in anymore. I mean, I just feel like she's such a brave person for being able to sit up there and explain her story to anyone and everyone who was able to listen to the story.
It felt like Fritzy was right there on the stage. I didn't know. If my teachers didn't inform me that it was a hologram, I would have never known.
I feel like it makes people realize that they can make a difference and they can do something in the world.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
What do you think? Amazing, right? And what do we know? We know that when you're engaged in an experience, when you're engaged with it, not just listening passively or watching, you feel that experience. It's imprinting, you remember it, and maybe you even feel it viscerally. Remarkable technology makes this all possible. Fritzy was filmed before 100 cameras answering thousands of questions. Custom voice recognition software and Pepper's Ghost projection, which creates the holographic effect, all contribute. And these tools, they engage you, the viewer, in the history and experiences of somebody else, building that humanity, that understanding, that empathy. This exhibition, it opened to rave reviews. It was named one of 12 must-see exhibitions globally by Smithsonian Magazine, featured on 60 Minutes twice, and in media around the world. Fritzy's legacy was assured. She had kept her promise to those 599 women that if she survived, she would share their story. And yet, Fritzy was worried. And I was worried too, though, about something a little different. Fritzy worried that one day Auschwitz might not be maintained, but would be left to decay, decimating proof of what happened to her and to millions of others. My worry was that given the enormous power of the holograms, what else could we be doing? What else should we be doing to capture this important history, these testimonies, while there was still time? For you know, survivors are in their 80s and 90s, and so that window, it's closing. The answer to both Fritzy's and my concern was, again, technology, only this time it's virtual reality. Virtual reality enables us to engage an audience as though you're there. Instead of thinking about meeting Fritzy in a theater or across a table, now imagine standing with her on the arrival ramp at Auschwitz as she describes to you how she and her family were pushed out of that boxcar to the sound of barking dogs and gunfire and screaming, and she was separated from her mother and 2 brothers, never to see them again. Or go with her to the barracks as she explains to you how each night, as she was hungry and cold and scared, her Aunt Bella would put her arms around Fritzy and she would whisper softly to her, "Tomorrow will be better. Let's just live until the morning and you'll see tomorrow will be better." These powerful stories are again enabled through technology. And one of the beautiful things about that technology is that it's scalable. So ultimately, millions can have this opportunity to walk in somebody else's shoes and see the world from their perspective. Let me give you another example of the power of virtual reality. In 2015, the United Nations commissioned a virtual reality film to highlight the plight of Syrian refugees. In this film, through the headset, you, the viewer, are taken to a refugee camp in Jordan, where you meet 12-year-old Sitter, who walks you through the camp. She introduces you to her family, and she tells you what life is like in this refugee camp. Well, it turns out that experience was so powerful that it changed the way the United Nations supports refugees. Remarkable, right? Now, extrapolate from there and imagine a world in which we all learn about history in this way. Could we eradicate hatred and a fear of others? Unbound by the constraints of geography and time, we could meet change makers, history makers, and eyewitnesses. As Elie Wiesel so poignantly said, when you listen to a witness, you become a witness. And as Amanda Gorman poetically challenged us at President Biden's inauguration, for while we have our eyes on the future, history has its eyes on us.